Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh. Today we have with us Dr. Alexander Spachis, the Minister and Sergeant Affairs of the Delegation of European Commission to Nepal. The European Union was set up in the aftermath of World War II to bring peace, stability and prosperity to Europe. Dr. Alexander, European Commission or the European Union gives out the message of peace and brotherhood, especially after the world broke into pieces after World War I and II. How can Asia, especially the South Asia and Middle East, learn from Europe?
What people in Asia know about Europe is something very personalized. The people of Europe have come out of the war. Instead of starting rebuilding their armies and their next confrontation, they went for a totally different system of governance. They decided to pull together the resources and the power sharing that we have known today as European Union, and through that they managed to replace the conflict with cooperation. And clearly this is what has led the European citizens to the prosperity they have today.
Europe clearly has achieved a sustained democracy, while most countries in South Asia are still experimenting with democracy. How has Europe achieved a stable democracy?
The first step was rule of law. The second step was respect of human rights, and the third step was solidarity. Europe has never been uniform. Europe has never been in all its corners at the same level of economic prosperity, but Europe has developed a notion of solidarity among its people, which means that those that are doing better off feel it is in their duty to assist those that are doing less well, to create the capacity, the infrastructure and the know-how for themselves also to do better. And this is in fact the principle of the presence of European Union also in South Asia and in Nepal. It's a part of an expression of the solidarity, part of a recognition of the fact that we owe our prosperity and well-being to this peaceful coexistence of many people from different races, different cultures, different religions, different social groups, and we believe that this is something that can be turned also into an asset here, and that's also our reason for being here. We believe that by encouraging the road to democracy, to respect of human rights, respect to cultural identities, respect to languages, we will contribute to the creation of a better environment and more development in the country.
We have witnessed a continual variation in the exchange rates of euro versus, or of euro and US dollar.
Yes.
Has this in any way contributed to the imbalance in global economy?
The exchange rate in principle is something that should reflect the relative strengths of the economies. And the relative strengths of the economies are a combination of a number of factors, including productive capacities, comparative advantages, natural resources, etc. What has happened recently is some derailing out of these fundamental economics, and there have been additional factors playing a role into the determination of the exchange rates. And these additional factors are more related to immaterial financial system, whereby the trading sometimes go wild into exchanging securities, into exchanging notional papers, into exchanging. The follow-up is that when you have such big flows of financial transactions which do not correspond to any particular real increase of wealth, you have multiplier effects, and these multiplier effects may end up in what mathematicians call unstable systems, where small variations in one factor may have a chain effect to much bigger variations further down the chain of transactions. And when these transactions are not backed up with physical assets or physical products or physical investment, that's where you get the problems.
It is estimated that by 2050, most countries in the Europe will have 1/3 of its population in the retirement bracket, and more than half of its population be over 50 years of age. Isn't that alarming to look into right now?
It is an issue that concerns a lot all the authorities in the European countries. This is also linked to a number of social development factors. The social development factors are linked to economic prosperity. When people feel less certain about the future, they feel less of an urgency to have many children that will support them in their retirement age. Another factor is the gender balancing. The fact that more and more women are professionally active in Europe means that they have less and less time available for staying at home and having more children. And these are social developments that on themselves they are welcome, but there is obviously the side effect, which is a drop in natality. So at the moment we have a potential risk of diminishing population, and clearly the way politicians are thinking about that is more in terms of stabilizing the natality rates rather than accepting a decreasing population and supplement it with imported population.
Asia has a higher bulge of the youth population. So will EU come out with a plan to invite or immigrate youths from Asia for education and for work?
The EU as a whole has yet not formed a proper policy for immigration, and the policy for immigration rests in individual countries, member states of the European Union. But from what I observe all over these European countries, nobody is planning to do a massive immigration policy like the policies we have seen 100 years ago in the United States. If there is to be some more advancement on the immigration front, it will be always on the front of well-specified, qualified personnel for specific types of jobs, but not in general blank entry of people, certainly not blank entry of people without skills.
We'll continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us. Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. We are in conversation with Dr. Alexander Spachis, Minister and Chargé d'Affaires of the Delegation of European Commission to Nepal. Dr. Alexander, you joined the European Union in 1981. How has your experience been over the last 3 decades?
It has been a fantastic experience because I have seen the transformation of Europe, and I have seen the transformation also of the country I know best, Greece, into what is European Union today. What is the major experience, the most major positive experience I have had from this European experiment is the experience of consensus politics and coexistence of people of different ethnicities, cultures, language, and social origin. It has been a proof that consensus in politics and consensus in conducting business is much more profitable at the end of the day for everybody than the more competitive systems of direct confrontation. And if I have one lesson out of this experiment is that prosperity is the result of peace, stability, rule of law, respect of human rights, and there is no alternative to reaching this type of prosperity other than by respecting the fundamentals of the fundamental values and truths of humanity.
How have you seen the politics and economy interact in Europe?
The European experience has been very pragmatic. We did not start talking about the high politics, but we started talking about what is immediately understood by the citizen, the advancement of the prosperity of the countries, of the regions, of the individuals. So we went through the phase of agreeing first that we want to advance economically And we did not start talking politics up front, but we left the politics a little follow the economic development. So the overall model was to design common policies that will improve the economy and the economic performance, and that would inevitably drag in, if you want, more consensus on political issues. And overall, we had a system where politics and political consensus has followed the economic consensus of the economic development.
In South Asia, we normally see that politics and economy are always at conflict. And what is there for us to learn from Europe?
It's very simple. Look at European history up until 50 years ago. It was competitive politics for the control of the economic resources. And the end result was every now and then big wars, small wars, bigger wars. It was destruction. So we managed to get out of this cycle of competitive politics for the control of economic resources. And the way we did it was by first increasing the amount of economic resources available, and then with a better sharing, by making everybody take a share of the cake, if I can be blunt. That was the convincing factor for less confrontational politics.
You joined your office in Nepal last September in 2008. What are your expectations while you are here in terms of getting works done?
I would like to see peace being stabilized. I would like to see in Nepal social and political consensus developing. What I'm hoping to see in the short term, meaning the next few years in Nepal, is a solidification of the democracy, the solidification of the rule of law, of a good governance in the country, and of an inclusive economic development which takes into account those that have been left out of development for some time, and now it's their time to participate also and take a share of the future prosperity.
The delegation of the EC to Nepal is in the process of getting upgraded. What does it mean?
At the moment, the delegation of the European Commission to Nepal is not a fully fledged delegation. Some of the indispensable functions are carried out elsewhere, notably in India. That includes functions like finance and contract business and some program and project management business. With the upgrade, more staff will join here, and therefore the full cycle of a cooperation program or project will take place locally, and the management will be 100% locally arranged, and that will increase, hopefully, the efficiency of our cooperation. But beyond this aspect of cooperation, which is a cooperation for economic development, there is another very significant aspect of our upgrade, and this is the recognition of the fact that Nepal has entered a new period in its history, and this democratic transformation of the country is something that merits more attention, both political and diplomatic attention, and more recognition. So the upgrade of the delegation is matching the progress achieved in the country, and it's also an encouragement for further progress in the direction of international participation of Nepal in the international, in the global system, better integration of the country in the neighborhood, but better integration of the country also in the international spectrum.
We'll continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us. Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. We are in conversation with Dr. Alexander Spachis, Minister and Chargé d'Affaires of the Delegation of European Commission to Nepal. Dr. Alexander, can you please elaborate on the supports that EU has provided to Nepal in partnership with its 5 member states, Denmark, France, Netherlands, Germany, and the UK?
The European Union is a major donor and aid provider in Nepal. Collectively, we are putting some 200 million euros per year, which is about $240 million per year. The biggest contribution is from UK, some 60 million euros, followed by European Commission, followed by Germany with some 40 million, and Denmark with some 30 million. In addition to that, we have a number of countries of the European Union, member states, who are strategically oriented donors with some specialization in their activity. That includes Finland, Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Sweden. Overall, you should see this contribution in proportion to the total contributions of donors to Nepal budget. We reckon that the total contribution of donors at the moment is about 500 million, which means that the European Union, including its member states, is giving about 40% of the total to Nepal. This €500,000 of euros per year is roughly 1/4 of the Nepali public budget, which itself is a relatively small budget compared to the economy of the country, which I understand is of the order of 20-25 billion euros. In this, on the one hand, there is the wish of the donors to assist as much Nepal as possible. On the other hand, of course, there is a caution that we have to be very careful. We do not want Nepal to become dependent on donors. Therefore, our contributions are not meant to actually make Nepal run today, but they are meant to increase the capacity of Nepal to act on its own. And this is why also the European Union contributions are strategically selecting a number of interventions. First and foremost, the social sector. We are also very interested in Nepal to promote the quality of the education, the tertiary sector, and that's why we have a very important number of European and national scholarships granted to Nepali students. We are very active and very interested for the building of peace and stability in the country. And this interest is not only theoretical, it is also translated into concrete actions. We are supporting many programs, both directly and financially through the state budget, so that what needs to be done to stabilize the country after the period of conflict is feasible. And last but not least, we are very much interested about the solidification of democracy. And that's why we are encouraging, with a little funding, many representatives of civil society, what we call non-state actors, NGOs, to step in and do actions at small scale, but also actions that are needed to supplement the needs of the country in terms of solidifying peace, democracy, protection of human rights, and social justice.
Currently, Nepal is suffering from the power cut problem as a result of climate change and the failure of hydropower plants. Is there any approach to getting some alternative energy or green energy from the support of the EU?
You put your finger into a major issue, not only for Nepal, but for the whole of humanity. Climate change is there, and climate change is brought partly by our actions. And climate change is something that now more and more people realize how dangerous it can be. And the European Union is indeed making a major political priority and also a major spending priority to address the issue of climate change. It is clear that future production of electricity has to come from alternative sources of energy, not by burning fuel or carbon. It has to come from wind, solar energy, or hydropower energy. And we have identified that Nepal, we have identified already 10 years ago from the European point of view, that Nepal was heading for a shortage of production capacity in electricity. So we have started back in 2003-2004 an important program of encouraging the use of solar panels to supply small-scale electricity in many remote areas. There are others that are encouraging, of course, the production of hydropower, and that's also very valid. But overall, let me say that investment in these technologies and these production capacities takes a lot of time. So if you want electricity today, you must have started planning and executing your investment 10 or 15 years ago. So if we are to address today's problems, we need, of course, a two-pronged policy. One is the quick solution to immediate needs, and the other is the longer-term planning that in the space of 5 to 10 years will make demand and supply match. At the moment, let me come back to the alternative energy idea. Nepal is in a unique position. You have lots of sun and lots of water up in the mountains. So you can develop very nicely both sides. It's a question of putting in place the necessary management capacity for this, administrative capacity, as well as encouragement at the local, at the small level, for people to use the existing technologies. The technologies are becoming cheaper and cheaper. So it's a question of organizing the program, rather the question of finding lots of cash for actually doing the small-scale improvements.
The support of the delegation of European Commission to Nepal was phenomenal during the elections of Constitution Assembly. Now, what will be the continued support for the writing of the Constitution and the next election, which will be the parliamentary elections?
We were invited to observe the elections of last year in Nepal, and we were delighted. We responded positively. We have sent a massive presence of election observation, and the result of this observation was that overall the observers felt the elections were sufficiently reasonable and fair to make legitimacy for the situation that follows these elections. And of course they had many observations. There has been a report with about 4 pages of observations of how a next election should be prepared better. And a big chunk of these observations are linked to the democratization of the regime and to the rule of law in the country. And of course, many of these are linked to an efficient drafting of the new constitution of the country. We are offering both moral support and economic support for the constitution drafting. And furthermore, we had already a preliminary invitation from government of Nepal to observe the future elections, and the European Commission has already responded positively that we will try to factor it in our plan of election observations for the future, because we believe that the next elections could and should be even better than the previous one, and for that we will be tireless in assisting government of Nepal and the institutions of Nepal and the people of Nepal and the political parties of Nepal to do their proper preparations. And at this point I must say that the conduct of a good and fair election is a very lengthy process. It's not something you can produce overnight. It's something that you need to start planning and working on how to do it probably 2 years in advance. So now it's the good moment in Nepal to intensify the activity of preparing the next political competition round, which will be the big elections after the constitution drafting. We are firmly in favor of democracy. We will do whatever we can to help the democratic process in Nepal, and also we are convinced that Nepal has a democratic future, and in fact Nepal has a future full stop. Nepal will progress.
Let us hope that our new constitution is written in time and we are able to hold our parliamentary election and get a new government hopefully next year and a new parliament. With this hope, I would like to wish you good luck and goodbye. See you next week, the same time. Thank you for being with us.